Before we get into it, if you enjoy this video, do me a quick favor, hit that like button and subscribe. We break down every story of this World Cup, the glory and the heartbreak. Alright, let's go. A 40-year-old goalkeeper gets both hands to the ball and somehow swats it into his own net. A captain from Real Madrid dragged off before the hour mark. A midfielder carried away on a stretcher in tears. Another player sent off for a wild, desperate lunge in stoppage time. Grown men weeping on the pitch. And a stadium full of their own fans and booing them off. And then, in the press room, one of the most worshipped coaches in the history of football looks the cameras dead in the eye and says, "What I gave Uruguayan football is nothing." This is the story of how Uruguay, two-time world champions, led by a genius, fell apart at the 2026 World Cup. And by the end, you'll understand that this wasn't bad luck. This was a collapse 3 years in the making. Let's talk about it. To feel the weight of this failure, you have to know the history, because Uruguay isn't just any nation. This is the country that won the very first World Cup ever played back in 1930, lifting the trophy on home soil. And then, 20 years later, they walked into the Maracanazo in Brazil and pulled off one of the greatest shocks the sport has ever seen, silencing 200,000 Brazilian fans to win the 1950 final. The Maracanazo, a nation of barely 3 million people, twice champions of the world, for decades they punched impossibly above their weight. A fourth-place finish in 2010 with a golden generation of Diego Forlan, Luis Suarez and Edinson Cavani. A quarter-final in 2018. This is footballing royalty. Which is exactly why what's happening now feels less like a slump and more like the fall of an empire, because here's the brutal truth. They had everything you'd want. A squad packed with players from Real Madrid, Manchester United, the best leagues on earth. And on the touchline, Marcelo Bielsa, El Loco, one of the most influential football minds of the last 2 years, the man Pep Guardiola calls the best coach ever. And they went home without winning a single game. Here's how it unraveled. 3 matches, a draw against Saudi Arabia, a draw against Cape Verde, and a 1-0 defeat to Spain that sent them crashing out. 2 points from 3 games. Not one win. And here's the part that stings the most. Cape Verde, World Cup debutants, a nation of 500,000 people playing in their first ever tournament, finished above Uruguay and went through to the knockouts. Uruguay, the two-time champions, finished third in the group, behind the newcomers. Eliminated, so what actually went wrong? 3 things. Let's start with the wound that bled all tournament. Fernando Muslera. Muslera is a Uruguayan legend. He made his World Cup debut all the way back in 2010, but he's 40 years old now. He had retired. And Bielsa made the fateful decision to call him back for one last dance. It was a catastrophe. By the end of the tournament, Muslera was arguably at fault for all 4 of the goals Uruguay conceded at this World Cup. The brutal truth, had he kept any single one of them out, Uruguay would have gone through. And the final act was almost too cruel to watch. Against Spain, in the 42nd minute, Alex Baena hit a shot to Muslera's right. The veteran got both hands on it and managed only to swat the ball into his own net, 1-0. The goal that ended Uruguay's World Cup. Muslera asked to be taken off at halftime. He was replaced by Sergio Rocher, and his early exit only fueled the painful debate about whether his time with the national team is finally, sadly, over. A legend's last World Cup, ending with his own hands betraying him, but you can't pin this all on one keeper. Because the deeper problem was the man. Marcelo Bielsa is a paradox. He's a 70-year-old Argentine who has openly described himself as a toxic perfectionist. He's a cult hero, worshipped by Athletic Bilbao and Leeds United, idolized by a whole generation of coaches. His ideas changed the game. But his tournaments have a way of ending in heartbreak, and in Uruguay the cracks were there long before kickoff. This was a campaign fraught with difficulty from the start. Question marks over his man management that were publicly highlighted by Luis Suarez himself. Back in November, after a 5-1 hammering by the United States, Bielsa admitted, in his own words, that he was toxic. And against Spain, that fractured camp came apart on live television. He hauled off his own captain, Fede Valverde, before the hour. And then Agustín Cannobio, another player Bielsa had reportedly fallen out with, completely lost his discipline and got himself sent off in stoppage time for a wild lunge. A team that didn't look like a team. It looked like it was coming apart at the seams. And here's the thing, we've seen this Bielsa story before. This was the second time Marcelo Bielsa has coached a team that failed to escape the World Cup group stage. following Argentina's infamous debacle in 2002. When his star-studded Argentina side arrived among the favorites and crashed out in the first round. 24 years apart, two different nations, the same gut-punch ending. The eternal Bielsa paradox, a man who inspires total devotion, who reshapes how football is played wherever he goes, and yet whose trophy cabinet stays stubbornly, painfully bare. The third problem. For all of Bielsa's attacking philosophy, this Uruguay simply could not put the ball in the net. And the warning signs were flashing for a year. In qualifying, they beat Brazil and Argentina back-to-back statement wins that had everyone dreaming. But then the goals dried up, all the way down to a miserable 0.75 goals per game across their final 12 qualifiers. The drought didn't start in this World Cup. It just finally killed them here. In his brutal, unflinching way, Bielsa refused to hide behind excuses, but he did insist his team was unlucky. "I can tell you that we deserved 7 points and only got 2, he said. "There were errors, and we failed to find an acceptable ratio between our chances created, the goals we scored and the goals we conceded. A team that created enough to go through, and a defense that gifted away everything they built. Chances at one end, catastrophe at the other." And so it ended the way it began, with Marcelo Bielsa alone taking all of it onto his own shoulders. "The journalists, the supporters, you all want to blame me for what happened, and I must take that blame," he said. "Any contribution a coach makes to a national team over 3 years is futile without positive outcomes. They will remember me as having left nothing. His contract was always set to end with this tournament. His reign is over. And the harsh reality is that he will not be mourned by Uruguay's supporters." The players cried, the fans booed, and one of the great football minds of his era walked away from a proud footballing nation, by his own devastating admission, having left nothing behind. So what now? Where does Uruguay go from here? Make no mistake, this is rock bottom. It's now 2 straight World Cups crashing out in the group stage, 2 different managers, the same humiliating result. The legendary era of Suarez and Cavani is gone for good, and the Federation is already hunting for a new man to rebuild, with former River Plate boss Marcelo Gallardo emerging as the early frontrunner, though nothing is decided yet. But here's the hope, because it's not all darkness. This is still a young, athletic, talented squad. At the very heart of it sits Federico Valverde, the Real Madrid engine, still in his 20s, one of the best midfielders on the planet. With the best years of his career still ahead, around him is a generation of players who now know exactly how this kind of failure feels. The talent was never the problem. The leadership, the killer instinct, the ability to turn chances into goals when it matters, that's what has to be rebuilt. Uruguay has fallen before. A nation that has won 2 World Cups and produces miracles out of 3 million people doesn't stay down for long. The empire is wounded, but don't write it off. The next chapter is being written right now, so I'll leave it with you. Was this Uruguay's failure a tragic run of bad luck? Like Bielsa insists, or was it a collapse that the warning signs predicted all along? And who should take this team forward? Tell me what you think in the comments. And subscribe, because we're covering every twist of this World Cup. Right to the final whistle in July. I'll see you in the next one.